Okay. Greetings, colleagues, officials, friends of NEQMAP and PAL networks, civil society organization, and all participants. Welcome to the regional launch webinar on the 4th topical case study on citizen-led assessment, a model for evidence-based advocacy and action to improve learning, with our country examples from India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Before we begin our event and quickly see our program agenda, allow us to share with you a few important housekeeping information. Please feel free to post comments, questions in the Q&A and or our chat box, and please identify yourself and your organization. And only panelists will be allowed to speak. Other participants who wish to speak must use a raise hand function so the host can authorize you to speak. And just for your information, this meeting is being recorded. Shall we briefly look at the... I'll hand it to you, Freya, please.
Thank you so much, and now it is really my pleasure to welcome Ms. Margaret Sachs-Israel, Chief of Section for Inclusive Quality Education at the UNESCO Asia Pacific Regional Bureau for Education. Margaret, the floor is yours for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Farial. Your Excellency, Mr. Muhibur Hassan Chaudhuri, MP and Deputy Minister, Ministry of Education, Government of Bangladesh. Dr. Aisha Rasak, Technical Advisor, Ministry of Federal Education Professional Training of Pakistan. Members of civil society organizations. Members of the NEQMAP Steering Group Committee, authors of the NEQMAP-ACER Topical Case Study on Citizen-led Assessments, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Section for Inclusive Quality Education of UNESCO Bangkok, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you to this very important meeting. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education systems in history, which has worsened pre-existing education and learning disparities, and in particular, opportunities for the most vulnerable groups. Moreover, we know that learning has not proceeded as planned and expected, despite governments having ensured the continuity of learning through distance modalities, and there has been an extensive learning loss, which threatens to extend beyond this generation and erase decades of progress made. Therefore, it's crucial to focus on ensuring quality of education for all in the new normal and as schools reopen. However, without data on extent of learning loss and how students are actually learning, how can we ensure this quality of education that we all are striving for? So with a drive for inclusive education of quality at the heart of Education 2030, the matter of how learning takes place and how it is assessed in the midst of the pandemic and also afterwards is a core priority for developing countries and the partners that support. Considering the far-reaching economic and social impacts of the current pandemic that affect education systems, achieving SDG 4 under the Education 2030 agenda as such is at risk. And therefore, more than ever, it's essential to understand where learners are at and how learning has progressed over the years before, during, and following the pandemic. Assessing and monitoring learning progress in education systems, including stagnation and loss, is crucial to investigate and understand the effects of the response strategies aimed at maintaining learning continuity, for example, distance and online learning. Continued monitoring once school reopened will provide crucial information on how well learners in education systems are recovering from the disruption. However, in the midst of COVID-19, as education systems experiment with hybrid and distance teaching and learning modalities, There are challenges in established systems of assessments in many countries, including national examinations or the daily classroom assessment practices deployed by teachers. This is why the role of citizen-led assessment becomes even more critical as we mitigate risks to learning losses as schools reopen. The COVID-19 crisis brings renewed focus on the concept of social capital, defined here as the norms and networks that enable people to act collectively. And we also know that mobilizing social capital can play a crucial role in determining how citizens and educators manage the uncertainties stemming from protracted school closures and learning loss. In this respect, the role of citizen-led assessments become even more relevant and timely to monitor learning and help mitigate the risk of learning loss in this uncertain period. We need a better understanding of the role of citizens can play to support learning assessments and monitor and track learning. Moreover, are citizens collecting data on learning outcomes amongst children and youth enrolled in formal education programs or the non-formal informal sector as well? We need opportunities to learn from country experiences to improve the quality and robustness of assessment systems, how education stakeholders can participate in assessments, as well as the data needed to report on learning indicators, including in the SDG 4 targets. Now, please allow me to express my sincere thanks to the Global Education Monitoring GEM Center, the Australian Council for Educational Research ACER Center, Dr. Ursula Schwante, Senior Research Fellow, Education Policy and Practice Coordinator, for our continued partnership in these topical case series since 2015. The annual Status of Education report, ASER, led by Dr. Suman Bhattacharya, the PAL network, the People Action for Learning, coordinated by Mr. Untitled Chapter, and the lead authors team from all 4 countries, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan, for your excellent work, contributions, and engagement with the NEQMAP network. Finally, now let us begin our webinar to launch, learn from, and explore the key findings from our South Asian countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marguerite. I couldn't agree more that this is really timely to have citizen-led assessments at a time when loss to learning is such a major concern. And I think Dr. Bela Jamil also has some findings from yesterday's webinar in Pakistan, where you launched the Pakistan case study. So we hope to learn from different research initiatives in the region as we move forward today. So let us look at the agenda. So would you like to just share the agenda before we begin?
Sure. Just to give a snapshot before we go into our proceedings and the rest of the event, we will start with the highlights of the key findings from the 4 countries, from India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And then another key session is the panel session, where the policy implication will be presented. And we have the honor to welcome the representative from the government of Pakistan, as well as from the Bangladesh. And then we will wrap up the launch of today. Thank you, Frayal. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, I really appreciate that. Just to give us an overview of today's program, I don't think NEQMAP really needs an introduction with this group. But just very briefly, the Network on Education Quality Monitoring in the Asia Pacific, it's a platform for exchange of knowledge, experience, and expertise on the monitoring of educational quality. And particularly, it focuses on learning assessments, acknowledging the important linkages to curriculum and pedagogy. So there are three key areas that NEQMAP focuses on: research and analysis, conducting comparative studies such as the work that is being launched and presented today, capacity development work such as training workshops, technical support and advisory services to member states and the stakeholders at national level, and knowledge sharing and exchange through the online knowledge portal, network meetings, and seminars and webinars such as the one we're having today. So I don't want to take a lot of time today, but just to give you a very quick historical context before we present today's studies. Research and analysis activities is a key component of NEQMAP's work. And in 2021, NEQMAP has conducted a thematic review on flexible learning strategies in ensuring quality learning outcomes with ACER Australia and the ASER research team in Malaysia, and with the NCERT in India. And these findings are going to be shared at the network's annual meeting that is going to take place in November 2021. Today, we are very pleased and excited to launch the NEQMAP-ACER Topical Case Studies. It's a series of topical case studies in using learning assessment data in education policy and practice, examples from the Asia and Pacific, specifically focusing on the South Asia region. This year, we are focusing on citizen-led assessments, which is a model for evidence-based advocacy and action to improve learning. By way of background, the first set of the topical case studies was launched in 2015, and the first topical case study focused on using large-scale assessments of students' learning to inform education policy. And you can access all these case studies through our website, and there are links to the publications that are available. The second series of the topical case studies focuses on the Pacific Islands literacy and numeracy assessment, collaboration and innovation in reporting and dissemination. And we had examples from the Pacific Islands focusing on small island development states on literacy and numeracy assessment. And they were presented to further investigate how data is used and informs the policy formulation processes in the Pacific community. The third ACER topical case study focused on Southeast Asia and on primary learning matrix program, thinking globally in a regional context. This was released in 2019 with a focus on the cross-national assessment in Southeast Asian countries: Cambodia, Laos, PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, and Vietnam. And this program was initiated by CMU and UNICEF. And today we are excited and very happy to launch the citizen-led assessments, a model for evidence-based advocacy and action to improve learning. This is the fourth in the series, released in June 2021, and continues to illustrate a range of ways in how monitoring is carried out to improve learning through civil action. Civil society organizations from Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan have been implementing citizen-led assessments to assess and represent the learning levels of all children. And this is really even more important today as we are going through a phase where COVID has led to protracted closures, and loss to learning is a high priority. So without further ado, I'm going to focus, give the floor to our, to the next session so that we can really start looking at the key findings emerging from the 4 case studies today. Thank you so much for being with us today, and looking forward to our discourse and looking at the findings together. And we hope we will then look at some of the policy implications emerging from these findings to inform our way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faryal, for the brief overview of our topical case study from the very first one. Now we are moving into the country presentation of the findings, and we have the honor to have our chairperson of the session, Dr. Bella Raja Jamil, the CEO of the ITA, Idara Idalim O Agahi Center for Education and Consciousness. Dr. Bella, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here today, and especially with all my colleagues from South Asia presenting the topical case study of the citizen-led assessments, a model for evidence-based advocacy and action to improve learning. Learning improvement lies really at the heart of this coming together of citizens in a very unique model. What we have today are the country case studies for India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh, which will be presented by different presenters. Perhaps as a way of overview, I'd just like to go through a couple of slides and then hand over to. Can we have the presentation? Ranaji? Yes.
It's on.
So the topical case studies that will be presented here really address the heart of the matter of citizen-led assessments, which is all around learning. And the core of the ASER model is the assessment tool. The next slide. And what looks as a very simple tool really has a very complex back end, which has been all aligned with the global framework for learning assessments. So this has been tediously done with the global proficiency framework and global proficiency levels as finalized by the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, along with all major assessment agencies. Next slide, please. So there are two core principles that brings all us citizens together. We assess basic skills, including reading and simple arithmetic, and it's as really simple as you can see. And if the children cannot read, they cannot move ahead, either in the school system or in life. And that's really at the core of all of this, where we are seeing that the learning crisis is really an equity crisis. And that, I think, comes so bold at this time with the COVID pandemic and what has happened with learning losses over the past almost 1.5 years or almost 2 years. And the second core principle is we assess children orally one-on-one. And because this is an assessment of both in school and out of school children, and there are no assumptions made whether the child can already read. So the pen and paper assessment would assume that those are set aside as we do orally one-on-one. So the assessment is really about foundational learning, and we are hearing a lot about learning losses, the learning poverty metric that has emerged is all gravitating around the issue of foundational reading and mathematics, or called foundational literacy and numeracy up to grade 2 level. The heart, again, of this matter is it's simple and quick to administer. It's easy to understand the results. And it is really built upon by using a common rubric in each country. The adaptations have been phenomenal, and it is now available and under development in 28 languages across South Asia. What we present to you is looking at languages 20 from India, 3 from Pakistan, Nepal 1, Bangladesh 1, Afghanistan 2, and Myanmar 1. And really, we use the results which are delivered quick and fast, but used for assessment advocacy, but above all, to improve the classroom teaching and learning, and even beyond the classroom. Next slide, and we wait here. Please I would really have the greatest honor to introduce our speaker, in fact, one of the pioneers of citizen-led assessments, Dr. Suman Bhattacharya. She is the Director of Research at ASER Center, the Research and Evaluation Unit of Pratham Education Foundation, that has been responsible for facilitating the nationwide annual status of education report, among other research, assessment, and capacity building activities. Suman leads a variety of large and small scale research projects examining different dimensions of schooling and learning, as well as she's involved in the organization's capacity building work. Suman is one of a kind and really has been working alongside Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, who's been the recipient recently of the famous Yidan Award. Suman is also the chairperson and is really very famous for being the chairperson of the board of directors of the People's Action for Learning Network, which comprises organizations in 14 countries across 3 continents. We are really a subset of the PAL network from South Asia. And we are really, Suman is focusing very hard on ensuring that all children acquire the foundations for lifelong learning. It's incredible. Suman's background lies in being a software developer, a high school teacher, an education specialist, and researcher. She's worked in the United States, Pakistan, Mexico, of course, in India, and Africa, and has published and taught courses on research, design, gender, and education. And we have in these studies various focuses, and with this particular one is looking at the partnership with the state government to improve children's foundational learning. In all our topical case studies, we look at what the focused area is and how the engagement proceeds from assessment to action. Over to you, Suman.
Thank you very much, Bela, for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Before I jump into the case of India, I just wanted to say that although citizen-led assessments and the ASER assessments in particular are indeed designed and led by citizen groups and organizations, a lot of our work is in collaboration with governments at many different levels. And I think that you will see that in the cases that we present today. So it is not only citizen organizations, but citizens collaborating with official groups to improve children's learning on the ground. So just to begin with a little bit of background, many of you may know some of this already. Pratham Education Foundation, which is our parent organization, has been working on the ground to improve children's foundational skills for more than a quarter of a century now. And the ASER survey, the tool itself and the processes to administer that tool, the survey was designed as a way of bringing focus across the country on what Pratham teams were seeing every day, which is that children were indeed in school, but they were not learning even the basics. Now, today in 2021, this is a fact that is much more widely understood and known. But when we started the ASER survey, 2005, this was very poorly understood and very not accepted by many people. So this is a huge annual household survey of children's foundational reading and math that we undertake every year. In a typical year, we cover more than 500,000 children. This is a representative sample from every state and district or rural district of the country. And with this, we aim to make this, we have indeed made the fact of children's poor foundational learning very visible both in India and elsewhere. The tool that Bela showed a glimpse of a little while ago, we don't have time to go into details, but you can see that its very simplicity makes it possible to have, Ranaji, just go back to where I was. Thank you. Makes it possible to communicate about learning with many different kinds of audiences, parents, community members, as well as teachers and policymakers. And so the same assessment tools can be used with volunteers in communities, with teachers in schools. And this tool, this assessment is today the heart of what many of you may have heard of, the teaching at the right level model for helping children acquire basic foundational reading and math skills, regardless of what grade they are in. Next, please, Ranjit. So this case study that we have written about in the NEQMAP and ACER case study is an account of one collaboration with a state government in India, the government of Karnataka, which is a state in the south of India. This collaboration began in 2016. At the time, Karnataka, as was the case and still is the case with most states in India, children were in school, but as you can see here, 42% of children in grade 5 could not read at grade 2 level. And this is a statistic that holds for most states in the country. Senior functionaries from the government of Karnataka's Department of Education met with Rukmini Banerjee back in 2016 and were convinced by her description of the teaching at the right level model to begin a small pilot in the state of Karnataka. And that pilot was 3 districts out of Karnataka's 30 districts. And there were 2 critical aspects to this implementation, this pilot, that made it very successful going forward. One was that the implementation was done by staff already within the education system, so teachers themselves with support and training from Pratham teams. Critically, the implementation was highly dependent on the selection and training of 500 cluster resource persons who are, again, teachers within the system. They themselves were already within the system, but they were a supervisory cohort that was tasked with supporting teachers and schools across the state. And these CRPs, the cluster resource persons, they were required to implement the program themselves for 15 days, just so that they had a good sense of what the model was, what it could do, and were themselves convinced by the outcomes that these very simple activities could produce in a very short period of time. The outcomes from that pilot were very successful, which led the state government to scale up to 10 districts in the following year, and then to an additional 5 districts after that, which was the last year that the program could be run for the entire year before the COVID-19 pandemic closed down all the schools. Next, please, Ranjit. Thank you. So just very briefly, look at the results from the last full year of data that we have, which was 2018-19, before the COVID pandemic hit. And if you look at this graph, if you think of it as a sort of a stoplight, where the reds are the bars that you want to see decrease, the reds to the left of each bar are children who cannot read even letters, or maybe can read letters, but not more. And the greens are children who have more or less acquired foundational skills. So light green is children who can read at grade 1 level, and the brighter green all the way to the right are children who are reading at grade 2 level. So in the 3 assessments done in this last year of the partnership, if you look from bottom to top, baseline, midline, and endline, you can see the reds decreasing steadily across that year, and the greens expanding significantly to the point where the proportion of children who could read at grade 2 level, which is the highest level that we test, almost doubled in a single year. So that is a huge result. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. So just some lessons that we have learned both from the collaboration with the Karnataka government, as well as elsewhere where this model has been used with teachers and education systems in India and in other countries. The ASER tool works at a number of different levels to help make this problem of poor foundational learning visible. So at one level, aggregating data from thousands of children across the state was central for the government to be able to see where children were progressing as needed, where they were not making the progress that they were expected to make, which allowed very quick targeting of resources, whether that was sending a cluster resource person for additional support or other kinds of resources 2 schools where data showed that the progress was not adequate. But perhaps even more importantly than the aggregate data, teachers and the CRPs within the system were able to see with their own eyes what data, just columns of numbers, cannot communicate, which is the fact that children who had been in the system for several years, when they were tested with the ASER tool, which is a very quick 5-minute or so assessment, these children, whether they were in grade 3 or 4 or 5, were not able to read. So this production of evidence for themselves became central for teachers and others within the system to really understand that this was a real problem that needed to be addressed. So these are the core elements of the ASER assessment that enable the tool to be used both by individuals, whether in communities or in teachers and schools, as well as at aggregate level by policymakers and decision and planners. And these are features that are really important at this point in time when we are trying to recover from the COVID pandemic. And as children return to school after extended school closures, this attention to foundational skills is more important today than ever before. All of these resources are available in the public domain. And if we have time later on, I'd be happy to share more information with you. But for the moment, I will stop and hand back to Bela. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Suman. That was fabulous to look at the whole effort of the partnership of the state government with the state government to improve foundational learning. But I think what is amazing is this whole aspect of from the individual to the system and making the invisible visible and real for learning, because that's such an intractable challenge that we have and involving all stakeholders. But I think the whole framing of the work of citizen-led assessments, working with governments for scale, is the whole ambition of SDG 4 for bridging the data gaps, but also to look at how we estimate and concretize SDG 4.1.1a, which is lower primary or foundational learning, so that we can make many children come unstuck because of the efforts that are being put forth. Before I introduce Seher for the Pakistan case study, I just want to quickly say that the learning losses report for the COVID that we launched yesterday, it was really sweet music for us to see the minister talking about how important this data source is for Pakistan, but also to be able to look at how remedial programs and can be scaled up during this period, because there was a big call from people like Dr. Faisal Bari, etc., that that's what is needed in the next couple of months or 3 months before we start, putting pressure on children for making up for lost time. Perhaps the remedial will accelerate learning, and we may be surprised, especially with this methodology. So coming to the Pakistan case study again, which looks at citizen and government coming together for improving quality. So quality learning remains the undergirding of the citizen-led assessments, all moving towards improving learning. Seher will present this model, this case study. Seher Said has been working in education for the last 8 years. She's a project management and implementation specialist and really a passionate advocate for improving access to quality education systems for all children. She is working as Deputy Director Research at Idara Taaleem Aagahi, a leading organization, civil society organization, and really oversees huge or large-scale assessments in Pakistan with lots of innovations, but she's been involved in both service delivery programs and impact evaluations. She extends her work beyond research into policy, but also looks at how implementation can be scaled up in the field. Over to you, Seher Said, for the Pakistan topical case study.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and good morning, everyone.
Can you can you please speak louder? I think I don't know if everybody can hear.
Sure. Is that fine now?
It's very faint. It's very faint, but we can hear you.
Very faint.
Okay, I'll try to speak a bit louder. Is it fine now?
Better.
Great. Thank you so much, ma'am, for a very nice introduction, and to everybody, thank you very much. The annual status of education report, ASER Pakistan, is Idara Talim o Agahi's flagship program.
Not here. Seher, can you speak louder, because we're finding it difficult to hear.
Is it better now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, great. ITA is a civil society organization, as Bela has mentioned already, and ASER Pakistan is ITA's flagship program, which has influenced the discourse on action and learning at provincial, national, and global levels. ASER was conceived and tested in 2010 during a learning emergency as a rapid child-friendly assessment tool that was implemented at scale. ASER Pakistan tools since then have been used orally on mobile apps and cell phones. ASER Pakistan has the robust capacity of being used widely during the current COVID-19 pandemic and its recovery pathways. The information is collected from all rural districts across Pakistan and selected urban districts. This generates comparisons for learning and access between both urban and rural areas. ASER service collect information from one government and one private school as well within every village for a sample, so that it can render on both delivery systems, that it can render data on both delivery systems. But the unique point about ASER is its dissemination strategy. The information is disseminated through multiple channels, diverse traditional and new media. Thematic ASER report cards on gender, disability, political constituencies, and learning with gender equity have been a lively space for evidence-based advocacy. The strategy involves government counterparts, citizens, teachers, parents, and village elders, and all play a vital role in empowering communities to contribute to shaping the education systems. Next. The tool has been covered learning in political constituencies, urging politicians to take actions for education. ASER Pakistan always tries that apart from collecting usual information, also brings some kind of innovation every year. And that is how it has mobilized not only major stakeholders within the country, but also politicians so that they can take actions for education. ASER Pakistan information also boldly highlights the social justice and equity dimensions through wealth ranking, gender, and more recently disability prevalence since 2016 using the WHO UNICEF Child Functioning Module. All three learning tools of ASER, which are translated for language, English, and arithmetic, have been converted into disability-friendly formats for hearing and vision impaired children in Pakistan Sign Language and Braille. ASER information has triggered several research and advocacy campaigns also, such as the Right to Education campaign, the District Ranking by Alif Alan report, etc. The information is also quoted by Economic Survey of Pakistan every year, and it's used widely by universities, by think tanks, by research organizations. The tools support and influence many diverse learning assessments as well within the country. It is thus a benchmark on children's foundation learning in sector plans and also project design documents. But the uniqueness about ASER is that ASER remains at its core down to earth and people driven, both in the survey design as well as in the dissemination of its results. Next slide, please. Next. Thank you. The message is simple that parents, citizens, and governments alike must recognize the learning crisis in their homes, communities, village, districts, provinces to take urgent action to improve the quality of education. Hence, ASER ensures, the team ensures that the information is imparted to each and every important stakeholder, starting from the national level where the findings are shared at the national level as a launch, where all important stakeholders, government, bureaucrats, officials, regulators are invited to take a part. Then at the provincial level, where each and every province also organize their own launches and make sure that, at the provincial level, all government stakeholders, all parliamentarians, all important stakeholders are part of it. The information is also shared at district level at a more nuanced, where the district launches are organized at a very small level, where district people who actually regulate the entire district functions, the schools, etc., are a part of it, so that they also know what is going on within the district, what kind of problems and challenges are schools facing, what are the learning levels of that particular district, and how it is compared with other relevant districts, so that they can take actions regarding that. But the most important part where it comes down to the village level is very important. The information is ASER believes that parents and politicians, teachers and technocrats all will do the right thing when they are compelled to do so and have a clear incentive to act. ASER therefore places great emphasis on the communication of findings and the fostering of informed public understanding and debate about children learning and what can be done about it. The incentive for parents and citizens has to be their children in their households, in their communities and schools and their villages. That is why every year ASER hold village gatherings called kateris, betaks or jirgas, or small village gatherings depending on where you live in Pakistan, because they have every province has a different name for it. These gatherings are organized at school and community sites to share ASER findings, mobilizing volunteers for education, and deciding upon actions with community members, youth, parents, including mothers, teachers, and government field officers. They began with ASER team members sharing the objectives of the conversation and reminding the attendees of the survey recently conducted in the village. The results that they shared underscoring that while the survey is based on a sample of 20 households, the trend represents the whole village. The information then leads to many conversations and reflections in the community, acknowledging gaps and taking actions for education, lapses in accountability, and the role of the village school, its teachers, and the larger system of education. The discussions are like a mirror for the community and parents. They begin to see more clearly the status of learning of their own children and education in public and private schools in their community. Next slide, please. That is how, by engaging citizens to act as monitors and decision makers for the public and private provision of education, ASER is a testament to how school systems and education policy can be influenced at the grassroots level. Citizens are involved in each and every part of ASER dissemination strategy. The policy briefs are shared, the posters are shared at a village level, district report cards are made for district launches, ASER bettings are conducted, like I've already mentioned, and politician knocking on the door campaign was another part where politicians were also involved to take actions. ASER is a testament to how school systems and education policy can be influenced at the grassroots level. It is due to this engagement that the governments and private citizens alike eagerly await the results each year. ASER Pakistan efforts are nationwide in engagement with all kinds of stakeholders for policymakers, youth, media, teachers, has communities, has led to a realization among the general public and policymakers that simply putting children in school is not enough to generate learning gains. There must be a greater concern about why children are not currently enrolled. And that is the basis of the entire ambition also behind citizen-led assessments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seher, for highlighting that. And we keep coming again to the partnerships with the government as a complementary affair, because we feel that learning lies really at the heart of all education endeavors. And what we have been seeing more and more is, as for the ASER tools from day one, inspired by what Pratham was already doing in India, that we have involved the assessment bodies of the government in all the finalization of the tools, such that the government of Punjab has created its own learning and numeracy drive tool, which is exactly the ASER tool to improve the learning in literacy and numeracy. But I think more and more, because it is seen as a public good, there is the ASER ambition of citizen-led assessments has really become today a part of mainstream conversations, and more important than that is mainstream actions for improving learning, as so well explained by Suman earlier. So politicians are very interested, and they're asking us in Pakistan, can you come and do the ASER in our constituency to see what we have done? And as the new elections come in 2023, this will maybe a very important temperature marker. Now we move on to Nepal, again, another very exciting case studies, which looks at the whole aspect of how ASER Nepal has transacted and mobilized local governments and youth to improve learning. These are the different faces of ASER South Asia. And to present the case study is Dr. Rajiv Timal Sena, who's the director of ASER Nepal and assistant professor at Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu. Rajiv is People's Action for Learning Network Country Director for Nepal. He serves the International Peace Research Association, IPRA, as a governing council member. He is leading the ASER research and is also involved with several peace education, culture of peace in school, arts-based teaching methods, and citizen-led assessments in Nepal. Over to Rajiv to present the Nepal topical case study. Rajiv.
Thank you, Bella ma'am, for the nice introduction. So, namaste everyone. I am going to present about the Nepal case. So, when we are talking about Nepal, so here particularly we are talking about the ASER method, and is already India and Pakistan case is being presented here. I think I am not going to repeat about, or I am not going to talk about the findings or method of ASER. So here I am focusing on more the motivation and results of the partnership between the local government and the CLA teams, how it went and what are the motivations and what are the results. So that's my main focus here. So ASER Nepal, actually it is a kind of loose forum in Nepal. So we started it in 2016. So we formed a small team, and we already we found more than 65 young motivated volunteers to work for the pilot work in that year. And already in 2017, we moved, we grew around 200 young people to work, and that was conducted in Budhan municipality. And until now, we already have worked more than 146 local governments, and still we are working in other 5 local governments this year. So it's growing, and we are partnering with a lot of local governments and a lot of young people. But here in this case study, we are presenting one case that is from Budhan municipality. So when we talk about that case, there are 1 or 2 questions I'm going to answer in this presentation right now. One is why local government and the youth are motivated for the partnership, and what are the results we achieve from this partnership. So that is what I'm going to address in this presentation. So when we talk about the motivation, so there are multifaceted motivations we found during this process. Like, for example, to make some note, so one slogan could be local youth for local children. That means the local youths are mobilized, or they are just mobilized there to talk about, to check, to assess, and to see how the children are performing. So that's one good motivations for youth, because they want to care about their own siblings. They want to care about the children in their neighborhood. So that's one good motivation we found for the local youths. And another point is that many youths are interested, they see CLA method as an opportunity to upskill themselves, to prepare themselves for the job market, because they got some skills about how to do assessment, how to gather data, how to be involved in research methods. So that's also another motivation for them. And it can be there's a highly local relevant, and there's a local ownership, because local government also see that it is there, they are running some skill based activity, or they are mobilizing young people under their patronage. So that's also giving them more visibility. So more than that, when we work with local government, we found that many the mayors and the deputy mayors or the political leadership, they are more interested. They see CLA as a campaign to fulfill their election plays, where they plays to mobilize local youth, provide skills for local youth, or support their employability. So I think they take CLA as an opportunity to fulfilling their campaign plays, because at the same time, within short span of time, we'll be mobilizing hundreds of youth. We are recruiting them, we are providing trainings them, how to do data collection, how to analyze, how to do certain work, and also they are traveling around their constituency in the households of constituency. So that is kind of something, political visibility also is very important for them. And another important point is the local government as a whole, even the bureaucrats there and and like concerned people there, it is also for them, it's opportunity that they are doing something to care or to take action to improve education. So this shows them this is a kind of opportunity to demonstrate that something is happening in the village, in the community. So when we are conducting CLA, means it gives a lot of meaning and a lot of motivation factors for different team, for the youth, for the political leadership, for the bureaucracy team, and for also other like local stakeholders. Next slide, please. Ranjita, okay.
Next slide.
Yeah, sorry, it's got stuck. Hang on, give me a bit.
Okay.
You can continue, Rajiv.
So main like when we talk about like this this issue, now I'm moving towards the result. So what we found. So I would like to share one small like incident, because I remember very clearly that one day I was shocked. Like one day, one young volunteer approached me after the assessment like completed, and the person shared that exactly in his voice, like, I was shocked that the children who live in a house I pass every day on my way to college can't even recognize the letters of the alphabet. I thought everyone who went to school could do that. How is this possible? What I can do about it? So that incident just like gave me ability to think about that. This is the method which triggered the local youths to think about what they can do to improve the situation. So it's not only role of the school, it's not only role of the government, it's also the role of the local youths and the parents and all we adults like who are working. It's also our role, what we can do to improve the situation in our neighborhood. So that is the very striking point I found after the this assessment partnership model. So it not only generated large like data set, it also generated large scale awareness for the issues of education in the community. And it is also important that it is helping for the local government to develop strategies and policies. Also, it is like important model to keep the youth assessor engaged to respond to the findings at local level for the long term, because the organization who work in these kind of issues, they come and they run the assessment, they go back. If we recruit volunteers from outside, so they will come, they will conduct assessment, they will go back. But when we mobilize the volunteers from the same neighborhood, from the same community, even though the organization go back, the local volunteers, they got opportunity to see the status of education, the status of foundational literacy in their community. And they are the ultimately one who can change that. They are the ultimately one who lives in that community for a long time. And they are the one who can work on for the sustainable like solution, because they are the one who can raise voices with their local government. So that's why in this partnership, it is very crucial to recruit the local volunteers from the same community where we are going to conduct the assessment. That's very important for sustained engagement of the to foster the accountability at the grassroots level also. And next slide, please. So when we talk about what are the lessons we got from Nepal, like Nepali case, the important point, CLA shows the preliminary promise as a multifaceted tool that can address a range of challenges in decentralized political system. We can see there are a lot of multiple motivations and benefits of the CLA. And another one, like for example, every year the central government collects the data, and many times that is inaccessible to the local civil society organization or the local government, because that is not made widely public. Even the flash report or every EMI's report card, that's not accessible for the other stakeholders. So CLA kind of activity can be quick to gather data at a small location, a small geographic, small area, and it can be quickly made public there at the community level. So we don't need to have a greater look throughout the like national data set. We can just have a small scale community level data set. And we can promptly address, we can promptly make policies or strategies to address in that at the community level. So that is very important, even politically in the decentralized context, in the federalized context, in the like to deal with the contextual issues of each local government. And another important point, I usually say that there's a discontent between the global plays and the implementation, because generally, even SDG is a global place that is placed by the national government. The national government commits some like goals, global goals at the international platforms. And at the implementing level, there are local partners, local government, schools, school management committee, even there are other CSO, other stakeholders working at the local level. So how we connect that? So we see that discontent between that, the global plays, but implementing partner are different. There's a no clear or sometimes very lack of the communication pattern. So CLA can be a cheap and effective way to bridge this gap by just quickly more like leading towards the evidence-based decision making, evidence like leading to the action. So that is a like very cheap way and doing at the community level. And the idea of skilling local youth and gathering comprehensive data to looking for opportunities for political visibility can be very much like motivating factor for the political leadership at the local level. Because many times we found that often the political leadership, they are much more interested into mobilizing, skilling local youth than just looking the research data. But we can see CLA as a like tool which is not only supporting like just making educational like plan and policies, it's also supporting to make local youth responsible and also providing them some opportunity. So that is this understanding also, I think it helps, it can assist us to design CLA in more better, more sustained way at the community level. And in conclusion, this is my last slide. Like altogether, we found a lot of positive responses, positive experiences while working with local governments, partnering with local government and local youths. So it lead us to the conclusion that ASER Nepal partnership model is successful strategy to tackle the education issues at both at local government and the grassroots level. In Nepali context, socially active youths who are also studying in college or they're working in somewhere in capital, maybe they have more credibility to work in their own community. So rather than having outsider people, it's important to mobilize the learned, educated, or college going or university going like young people to work in their local neighborhoods. They have more credibility to work there. So they friends in their community. So also I found CLA very effective, is clearly effective, and also it is generating interest and creating motivation in social issues. Like, however, I was not able to track citizen assessor for long enough to attribute how much real action is triggered by it. But I remember that a lot of stories, hearing lot of stories from our volunteers when they talk with us, even post assessment, I see that they are triggered. They are triggered to do something in their community to change the learning loss, to address the issue of learning, foundational literacy in community level. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Rajiv. That was fantastic. And as Marguerite had mentioned earlier, the whole aspect of how citizen-led assessments and the work that is being done is generating an extraordinary amount of social capital, all focused on aspects of learning and accountability, certainly. But I mean, I just can't help but recall, but so many researchers recently, including the ASER Learning Losses study yesterday that we launched, is showing very high level of household level family members' engagement in the business of learning, as even expressed by the children themselves. So I think, you know, we are looking at both the demand side and the supply side, but the whole idea is from assessment to learning. And we will address some of the questions that are coming up, but let's go quickly to the last case study with Bangladesh. And I have the pleasure of introducing Saeed Ahmed. He is a public policy specialist and founder and CEO of the Institute of Informatics and Development, IID, in Bangladesh, a public policy institute. He's been really passionately involved in evidence-based policy, mobilizing lots of policy advocates around the famous policy breakfast meetings. And he heads the ASER Bangladesh and the steering group member for the network on education quality monitoring in the Asia Pacific, NEQMAP, at UNESCO Bangkok. So very own for NEQMAP and for the ASER South Asian group from the PAL network. Over to you, Saeed Ahmed. We have about 3.5, 4 minutes. So please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, very good, very clear. Thank you.
So to the very quick recap is that IID is a public policy institute. So we focus on advocacy mostly. So when we started a nationwide education advocacy with BRAC, and then one of the things we realized is that combining advocacy and awareness works very well. So later on, we started working with with ActionAid and others on a a citizen report kind of thing that focuses on does a survey of the education system in the locality, and then brings that data evidence back to the locality, and sits with in a town hall kind of thing, sits with the different stakeholders to set goals. However, the actual point of learning was at the time we were not assessing that. We used to assess different other rights of education. But then the couple of again, as from advocacy perspective, our also focus was, as I said, the one that bringing the high level policymakers. We call that to make policy public, you need to do 3 things. You need to inquire for the evidence, you need to inform the evidence to the policymaker, and you need to then involve them. So our focus was mostly on informing and involving them in a very high level policy initiatives. For instance, the policy breakfast that we do with bring the senior policymakers. We also want actually bringing the youth in the whole process. We have a nationwide youth network called Youth for Policy, who basically get training through the whole process. So during this exactly same time, next slide, is during the exactly same time, we came to know about ASER, and we realized that ASER perfectly fits with the education advocacy we were doing, rather actually is the missing piece of the puzzle. So what we did is that because again, at that time, 2 things were happening. One, we started talking about learning, and assessment as more important thing, but also at the same time, government was also somewhat moving from denial about to a more accepting about the failure of traditional assessments, because we see that governments are really having passed, the students are passing with flying colors, but also at the same time nothing is happening when you do this type of assessment. Of course, our initial the first pilot when we submitted to the government, they did not like it very well. There was fierce criticism from the minister himself, the then minister. Rajit was also there. However, in the later on, as we went along, government also kind of started, getting more into it. The next slide. And few of the things that happen now here is, one, ASER started becoming a more of a tool for the data collection, and not only this IID. In fact, today I was actually giving permission to and also signing a MOU with the BRAC that they are actually doing a study where they want to use the ASER tool. IID itself is taking a 2-year project with UL where we will be doing citizen-led monitoring, again using the same ASER tool. So ASER tool is now becoming, we have been using it and as a tool to properly understand the the learning situation, but also at the same time, just last week when we IID started a new parliamentary caucus, we call the Parliamentary Caucus on Social Justice, and in one of the sessions, the whole discussion was on the education justice, and then where the education inequality, and we shared this this basic tool that how this tool can actually properly, assess the learning loss at the very basic level, particularly during this pandemic and post-pandemic, where students are out of the schools. You cannot, assess them in their schools. They have changed their, geographical positions. Schools have been closed. So for SDG 4.1.1, this is kind of the tool we need. So I think the policymakers also, the parliamentarians also thought like, this is really good. We apologize that, the minister who, there's some political issues are going on, so couldn't join at the very last moment. He got stuck with the law enforcement agencies in a meeting. He just texted me, but he was very willing to look forward to it. That so overall, I would say, a tool like this is becoming has the potential to play a key role in maximizing the impact on education policy and decision making in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saeed. And again, showing another facet of how the ASER tools and the citizen-led assessments are being looked at from the point of view of social justice. As I said earlier, this represents the equity crisis, but at the same time, a big possibility when the invisible become visible, and when you can see how scalable and simple this is, showing results with evidence to baseline, midline, endline, when you turn this around into an action tool. And I think that's the power of it. So thank you so much, all four of you, for the country case study, so exemplary and so amazing to see the breadth of the stakeholder partnerships that we have. And we have a couple of questions that have come up, and I'd like very much if we can respond to those questions. One is to Suman. Given the pandemic, this is from Jyoti Bhavane, given the pandemic restrictions and protocols, how have citizen-led assessments been modified, adapted when compared to normal situations? So this question is to Suman, and there's another one then later. Suman, over to you.
Thanks, Bela. Jyoti, we've not been able to do the usual ASER survey for the last 2 years because the kind of assessment that we do requires us to be one-on-one with children. And of course, that's not been possible. So both ASER 2020 and right now we have in the field ASER 2021, they're not really in the field. They're phone-based surveys, which are looking at very many other aspects of how children are engaging with learning during these times. But we have not done what is at the core of the usual ASER survey, which is the assessment. Now, in terms of using the assessment tool for programmatic purposes, that varies a great deal across the country. As you know, there are regions which are opening up now. So there are programs which are back to assessing and trying to help children learn better. And there are areas of the country where that is still not possible. So there's a whole range of situations.
Thank you very much. While some countries have done that, other countries have also done a hybrid kind of assessment as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Suman. We move to Rebecca Gadi's comment. That's from Philippines. And she's asking question, who initiates the cooperation networking amongst the community, local government, and even private sector if they are invited? And I really want a very quick response, perhaps from both Seher and Rajiv, since you were involved with local level engagement. Rajiv, maybe you, and then Seher. Rajiv? Seher? Okay, since we're short of time, so I suppose I can respond just from the Pakistan side, but Rajiv, are you there? Okay, let me just quickly respond. Maybe there's some networking challenges.
Ranajit is raising his hand. Is Ranajit raising his hand now?
No, not me.
Okay. So just very quickly, Rebecca, so the cooperation networking right from the community level to the local government is done quite formally, including the private sector. From the government side, Of course, we have to have NOCs, etc., for Pakistan. But at the local government, again, with the district governments, we have agreements to be able to do this data collection. And with the community, it's a very exciting engagement where they see when we come and share, including maps drawn for them, and then asking their village elders or influencers to work and what we are doing and how we conduct the assessment. Of course, after 10, 11 years, it's so well known that and everybody really welcomes the survey. I've never seen anyone saying, please go away. Everybody is looking forward to the survey because even the grandmothers want to know whether their grandchildren are learning or not. The government and the private sector sometimes do ask for a letter or something, which our volunteers and enumerators also have. So it's a formal, pretty formal at all levels. Everybody wants to see the evidence and wants to be convinced that this is what we are involved in. But if you have many years of experience, you already have a reputation that precedes you, and so it takes place. But with government, everything is very formal. We now come to the end of this segment. I'm sorry we've run over time, but I hope we'll be able to make up. Thank you very much once again to all the speakers. It's really a fascinating journey, and I will invite all of you to come and visit our places so that you can see the joy of engaging in this, the excitement, and also the challenges that come with it. But as I said, it's exciting to see after 2005, how today we talk about ASER and CLAs almost, totally a mainstream assessment, which is well recorded now in the UIS statistical exercises as well, and is seen as a legitimate tool for giving solid evidence that can be reflected in the GEM report. But thank you to ACER, to NEQMAP, to UNESCO for hosting us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bela, for your exciting, facilitation of this very important research studies and for bringing life into the work that is being carried out in South Asia region. We will now hand over to I want to congratulate the 4 authors for the excellent work that has been done, for contributing to research and for the body of evidence that we have to inform our policy and practice. And let us continue with the discourse. Over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Khan. So we have come to the final session with a few minutes left, but it's also an opportunity because we only have one representative from the government of Pakistan, and Dr. Faryal Khan will moderate this session for policy implication.
Sorry, is Ursula joining us?
Yes. Thank you so much, Faryal. Thank you so much. Yes, before we move to the next session on policy implication, I just looked at the time, apologies. Before we move to that, we will hear from our co-editor, Dr. Ursula Schwanner, who is our research fellow from the Center for Global Education Monitoring from Australian Council of Educational Research, GEM-ACER. GEM-ACER supports country and education systems in developing and implementing robust learning assessments and in efficiently using the educational data to inform education policy and practice. Dr. Ursula Schwanner managed the ACER GEM's engagement with the NEQMAP through knowledge sharing, capacity development, and research, such as this topical case study today. She also leads the cooperation with the People's Action for Learning, or POW network, which joins citizen-led assessment in 14 countries in Africa, Asia, North America. Dr. Ursula also works with individual citizen-led assessments to design and implement technical support. The floor is now yours, Dr. Ursula. Thank you so much, Dr. Faryal.
Thank you very much, for this introduction. Today, I would really like to take the opportunity to thank UNESCO Bangkok and NEQMAP Secretariat, Margaret, Farayal and and also Mark Mans, who was the co-editor for this particular study, for realizing this topical case study on citizen-led assessments. I would also like to thank the authors and today's presenters and everyone else who has contributed to this publication for illustrating the 4 cases of how citizen-led assessments have been implemented in South Asia. The role of citizen-led assessments in providing evidence on learning levels of all children, so those enrolled in schools and those who are not attending schools, is now more important than ever. And the 4 cases that were presented today and that are further detailed in the topical case study report for those who want to know more details. So these 4 case studies really illustrate how evidence from the assessments has been used to take action in education policy and practice to improve learning. As Suman has pointed out in her presentation of using ASER India in the teaching to the right level approach, attention to foundational skills is essential as children now return to school, and to identify where the students are at in their learning and to respond to their learning needs. Zaha's presentation on ASER Pakistan's dissemination strategy highlighted the importance of involving and empowering a range of stakeholders at various levels, including government representatives, teachers, parents, and community members, to create solutions for improving learning at the different levels of home, school, the village, through to the national level. And similarly, in the context of ASER Nepal, Rajiv has demonstrated how the assessment was used to mobilize and upskill local youth and to advocate for education in the local neighborhood. And this model really convinced local government representatives of the relevance of the assessment and of using the evidence on children's learning to improve education in the municipality. And finally, Said's presentation on ASER Bangladesh highlighted the important role of citizen-led assessments as policy advocacy tools by providing the evidence on the quality of children's learning outcomes that may eventually form part of Bangladesh's education monitoring system. And this leads me to my final comment about the influence of citizen-led assessments in the Education 2030 agenda around monitoring SDG 4 target 4.1a on the proportion of children achieving minimum proficiency in reading and mathematics. So the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, which has been mandated to monitor the progress of countries against SDG 4, has acknowledged citizen-led assessments as an important data source for countries to report against this target, is to ensure that the inclusion of the most marginalized populations that are indeed reached by citizen-led assessments. And this shows further that citizen-led assessments are an important part of education monitoring systems at the global, regional, national, and the local levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, Prayal, please.
Carry on.
No, I would like to say thank you so much to Dr. Ursula for echoing the highlights from our 4 countries' findings earlier. That was a really great summary in sharing with us in addressing the needs to monitoring and ensuring the level of our learners from all backgrounds. So this is really much fulfilling the gaps and addressing the issue of equities. So we have come to the final session, Dr. Khan, in sharing the view from the policy level. I will hand the floor to you, and Dr. Khan, as head of the NEQMAP Secretariat, will moderate this session with following with the wrap up of our webinar today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, thank you so much, Ursula, for your excellent synthesis. It is really now my distinct pleasure to invite Dr. Aisha Razak, who has kindly joined us today. Dr. Aisha Razak is the technical advisor at the Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training, Government of Pakistan. And we are very excited to have this dialogue with you, Dr. Aisha, because we've listened to 4 amazing case studies. This is very pertinent work on learning assessments, as we are all grappling with the loss to learning today, as with the protracted school closures, children are facing loss to learning. And then how do we build on the work that has been presented to us today to inform our policy and practice? And as a policy maker, as an advisor to Minister of Education of Pakistan, it is really my pleasure to engage in this conversation with you and to have your perspectives on what are some of the key implications for policy and practice within a regional and national context. So how do we utilize these findings to inform policy and practice? In your perspective, what is your critical appraisal of the studies and the experiences that has just now been presented from India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh? In your perspective, what are the strengths and areas that need further clarification, and how can then we build on this work? Over to you, Dr. Aisha.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much to all the organizers and especially Bela for extending the invitation. It's always actually a pleasure to be a part of, and I'm sorry I had to go in and out of this meeting because I'm at the ministry and there are unpredictable and unplanned firefighting issues that are always going on. And so I was in and out, but was able to catch parts of it. I did read your report, so, and as an evidence, I have that in front of me. So thank you very much. I think the best part, I think that ASER launched its most recent assessment that was conducted earlier this year after a very long school closure because of COVID. So yesterday we were able to, at the ministry, the minister launched that report. I think what I like in particular, and I'll come to the critical appraisal part later, but I think just the platform or just the Bela has been very consistent and very persistent in making sure that nobody forgets that everyone knows that there is an out of school children problem at hand, and there is a learning problem at hand. I think COVID just gives us an opportunity. And I would say for people who are sitting at the ministry or in the government, an opportunity really to basically start anew. I mean, it's very difficult for politicians and for people in the government to say that we have been running these schools for so long and children are just not learning, when we know that for the past 20 years we have been able to budge the enrollment numbers a little. So at the primary level, we know that at least that's what the data suggests, that we have been able to send at least 95% of our children to school at the primary level. There's a lot of course, there's a long ways to go at the secondary and higher levels, but at least at the primary, we have been able to make some dent. But look at the past 20 years, the learning levels are just not budging. I mean, there's plenty of data, not just from ASER, but from other studies that have been conducted. LEAPS, for example, is a large scale, and for the past 20 years, a study taking place in Punjab schools with the help of the World Bank suggests that numbers learning-wise are just not budging, and that's a serious concern. We know that TIMS was recently released. Pakistan attempted LEAPS for its 4th graders for the first time in 2019. The report came out and suggests that we are just not meeting the benchmarks. So I think the learning problem we have known from multiple sources exist. And we just need to start doing something about it. I think, let me just, and I'm sorry, because I've been in and out, I've not been able to gather my thoughts too much, but I've made some notes, and let me just very quickly look at the 2 or 3 key things, being cognizant of time, that I would really like to touch on. I think the model itself, the citizen-led model, so I mean, information is key. We know from research work done elsewhere, evidence, work done elsewhere, that one of the smartest buys in terms of, implications for policy, one of the smartest buys is to inform the community and to inform the parents. I think there's plenty of evidence that now suggests that if parents know how their children's school is are doing, they want to do something about it. Now, what is it that they want to do about it is something that they need guidance with. I think, and I think that's where my a bit of my critique lies. I think this is excellent work, and I think especially looking at Pakistan's ASER work and the stated objectives that the main goal is advocacy, and also advocacy at the community level, ensuring that you're informing people, but then what is it that the people are supposed to do as a result of being informed? I think that piece, to me, is not entirely. I think probably needs to be highlighted more. Maybe there's some more reflection that we need to do on it. So, for instance, my question would be, I would be very interested in finding out whether, as a result of these community engagements, we were able to engage more parents with their children's education, for instance. So, are we keeping track of things such as, are more parents writing to their schools now? Are more parents writing to their provincial and national governments now, or their district level governments now? Are more parents engaged with the children education in education at home now? I mean, ASER's report yesterday shows that there's a lot that parents can actually do, whether they are, irrespective of their education level, as a result of this information. There's a lot that can happen at home, as simple as, making sure that the child is going to school regularly, making sure that the child is spending time at home on doing their homework, making sure the child is writing every day, even if the parent is unable to see what they're writing. So I think it's are you visiting schools more to talk to your teachers about, the fact that your child is not learning or is unhappy with the school? I think it's those kind of links that will enable a policymaker or somebody who's sitting in my office to see the, because I think that's the very first step of then suggesting that this is something that's working at the community level to improve schooling for that particular community, and now you make the policy connection with the higher level. So I think for me that piece is a little perhaps missing, and maybe it's just because I don't know enough, but I think that needs to be highlighted. I think the recognition that assessments, whether led by citizen or led by public entities, need to happen a lot before at the grade 5 or grade 8 level. I think that recognition is there now. I think it's taken us a while to get there. I think in Pakistan we now know, and I think Bela would be able to share more because she works so closely with the provincial governments. But for instance, in Punjab, we recognize for a very long time, their literacy and numeracy testing drives that are done by the government, that assess children, I think, at the grade 3 level, and look at whether children have been able to form those foundational skills that they require at that level or not. In KP, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan, there's recently been in their new policy document a lot of stress on making sure that by grade 3 children are proficient in grade level competencies. They're also they were also talking about doing similar assessment work, whether sample based or large scale, at the first grade and second grade level. So there's this increasing recognition that this needs to happen. And Faryal, please let me know if I'm running out of time. When I start talking, I just
No, absolutely. You've just pointed out some key areas for future research and the missing links that would be helpful for you and for policymakers as you make decisions. So I think that is really critical feedback.
I think one other thing, Fariyal, other thing that I want to highlight, and I know that Bela wants to hear this too, so, so I would really love to say this. And I think it's linked with your case study from India. I was actually really intrigued to see that. I perhaps did a long time ago, but not recently, so that wasn't in the fore of my mind. But this approach, to use these assessments, how can we, build them into our existing education system, so that the functioning of the public schools can be made better. And so what we have done recently, and we have launched an impact evaluation. It's a pilot project that we have started off in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, and are actually bringing it now to Islamabad in this current year. And the program, it's not based on the ASER tool, but the concept is the same. So it's basically using Pratham's approach to diagnosing children's learning levels at these foundational levels, and then using them to remediate in the school settings. So using the targeting at the right level approach. That's been tried and tested in various parts, including India, and implementing here in our context. There, of course, some changes that we have made to it. It's the own government's own curriculum that's being followed. The diagnostic tools that are being used are not ASER tools; they are SLO based tools. The teachers are going to be trained to do this diagnostic at the school level, and then make a plan for their own that works for their own classroom, for their own children. So I just wanted to highlight that similar work is happening. Whether ultimately we are able to do similar work through citizen-led approach, especially when it comes to non-formal, or where we really, and to be very honest, if we are to ever devolve our education, which we keep saying, right to the local, to the grassroots level, I think one of the ways in which we can do is by really engaging the community in making sure that their schools are working and functioning, and helping their children learn, and maybe at some point really engage community and parents and the PTCs that we keep talking about in doing these kinds of assessments, and really holding their schools and their government officials responsible for the schooling of their children. But for right now, what we have done is that we have tried to
Thank you so much.
Embed this in the public school system.
Thank
but
you.
I'll stop here.
Yes, no, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Just final word from you, and what would be some key recommendations to enhance the application of these findings at national or regional level? How would you recommend that we utilize the findings of these studies at national or regional level?
So, Fariyal, I would say, I think the very, very first, to me, communication is always key. I mean, so, and I think we have, ASER is doing a great job. I think they have learned this art of making sure that, the study is disseminated, and there's recognition at the policy level that this work is out and it's important work and it can't be ignored. I think we have done that really well at the national level with the launch yesterday and, the events before. I think, to me, communication is very key. I write in the newspaper very regularly. I write op-ed columns. So I've seen communication really working. I mean, you keep saying, things with evidence over and over, and keep saying them through multiple fora, I think really helps. I think, so that would be my first recommendation. I think not just staying inside these our ivory towers, and really putting the information out there, and doing a lot of advocacy work around it. I think that's key to me. Like I said before, I think there's recognition already that things are just not working at the foundational level. So things need to be done. I think now the key is to, and Bela, I think Bela's society is already doing, so the remedial program that we have, I discussed is we are doing that as the government. But for instance, Bela has a couple of different programs based on these assessments. They're then running remediation programs. For example, I think Siani's area has done a good job. Chalo Padho Badho, I think, is another remedial program that Bela's ITA is doing. So I mean, those are all great work. We just need to get the information out there and tell people that this works. So this information that we are collecting feeds into programming, and it's not rocket science. Everyone can do that, and this is how it's led to improvement.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. Aisha. Thank you so much. So it's advocacy, getting the key messages out, and sharing with the wider audience how to do it. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yes.
And that's what takes the work from being research out of the ivory tower down to practice on the ground. Thank you so much for joining us today, for your for sharing your perspectives as a policymaker, as a decision maker, because this is very important for us that we make the links between research work, but then how we utilize the research to actually inform policy. And this really brings us to the last part of our concluding segment. I would like to just conclude very quickly with a few remarks. I mean, these research studies are critical because research continues to inform educational reform, to enhance our practices, to enhance the effectiveness of education systems. And today, in the midst of COVID, as we reimagine education and we look at the futures of education, what is the role of citizen-led assessments as we grapple with the loss of learning due to the protracted school closures, the traumatic experiences some of our kids have are facing, our learners are facing, and so, they are learners who are at critical points in their education careers, and they have to prepare for exams. There's that pressure of they're under a lot of pressure. So these studies have helped to expand our understanding of how teaching and learning is taking place. And it points the way for implications for curriculum pedagogy and how schools need to organize themselves, creating those very important linkages with communities, with parents, with local governments as we proceed. Some of the key takeaway points for me were that the partnerships with the government and civil society are essential for assessments to look at quality learning. We need to encourage politicians. We need to make politicians and decision makers aware of some of the work that is being carried out, and bring in local governments and local stakeholders to improve the quality of learning. And besides aggregating data, it's very important that we have direct observations of the teachers so that teachers are central to identifying and addressing some of the key learning issues. So we need to open up those channels of communication. It's not just formal assessments, but also formative assessments that are critical for us. And we need to partner with local communities, especially in the rural areas, engage youth, family members, and society, civil society. And one key point that really came out is, this particular attention to issues of inclusions, especially on the empowerment of the underprivileged learners, such as those living with learners with special needs, or who may be living in ethnically, who may be at some kind of a disadvantage. How do we then bring those learners in the fold? So this has been a phenomenal work to listen to the findings today. Our role is to continue with the advocacy, to continue with the communications, to take these key messages as we move forward, as we reimagine education. So I take this opportunity once again to thank all our authors, our key coordinators, and our discussants today. This has really come together beautifully, and thank you everyone for your time and efforts for making this a discourse that gives us some food for thought as we move forward. So there is we have work to do, and you've given us some evidence from the ground. inform our work as we continue. So thank you very much to all our friends and partners, and thank you to the participants for the excellent questions they've asked, and our moderators who were absolutely amazing in bringing together the discussion and the discourse. Thank you very much to all of you. I think we can conclude and continue with our work, because this is only the beginning of a process for me, you know. Now that the studies are completed, we have to now continue to see how we will use the work.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Bela. Thank you
so much
for bringing your energy into our discussions today. And the authors were absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Mr. Ranajit. Thank you so much for all your coordination. Ursula, for your synthesis. For your excellent coordination. She is like a goddess with many hands. She is like doing multiple things at the same time, and I don't know how she continues. You know, she's amazing. It's been a pleasure to work with you on this. Thank you
so much. Thank you.
And Maziar and all colleagues. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sure, Doctor. Thank you so much.